Welcome back. This is part 2. We were discussing the stages in the lives of social movements, specifically bureaucratization. To become a political force, a social movement must take on bureaucratic traits. To become effective and gain some longevity, it must rely less and less on the talents and charisma of its leaders, and more on a capable staff, specifically an office staff. People to recruit members, people to drum up money, man the phones, open envelopes, and so forth. Organizations or movements such as the college campus movement of the 60s, the anti-war movement, while it was successful, it didn't continue to this day because it had no specific organization. It relied on its leaders, and they eventually were co-opted or moved on. The National Organization of Women is the exact opposite. Despite its changing leadership, its well-established office staff and organizational structure today offers a steady voice on behalf of feminists. There is a downside to bureaucratization, however. The leadership may spend more time on building up the organization than keeping the spirit or the radical edge of protest going. Stage 4, again looking at your diagram, either in front of you or on the website, is decline. Eventually most social movements lose their influence. There's a number of reasons. 1, they may achieve their goals and disband. 2, they may become part of the mainstream. 3, their leadership could be co-opted and fall apart. 4, they may actually be destroyed by the social order that they are protesting against. From a political science standpoint, America is revolution-proof, and we're going to get to the types of social movements in a few minutes. But my point here, in terms of the stages of social movements, is if enough people want something to change in this country, it does. The civil rights movement, lasting some 60 years, the women's movement, again lasting 60, 100 years, and the anti-war movement, which was only 10 to 15 years, all came to a head in the 60s and early 70s. And basically, the country paid attention, and enough people said, this must change. And it changed. We had radical social change in this country due to those movements. So what are the different types of social movements? Weinstein doesn't really discuss them at this point, but I'd like to throw them out to you. Looking at another diagram on the website, one variable to look at in social movements is who is change. Social movements target certain groups of people, or they target the individual. Another variable asks how much change has occurred. Some movements seek only limited change in our lives, while others are radical. Combining these variables results in 4 different types of social movements. The first is the alternative social movement. It's the least threatening to the status quo. It seeks limited change in only a part of the population. Promise Keepers, a men's Christian group and national organization, is an example. It encourages Christian men to be more spiritual and supportive of their families. I think, without looking it up, there's about 5 million of them. Redemptive social movements also have a selective focus, but they seek radical change in the individual they engage. For example, self-help groups. Alcoholics Anonymous is an organization that helps people with an alcohol addiction achieve a sober life. Next, we have reformative social movements. They aim for only limited social change, but they target everyone. Multiculturalism, for example, is an educational and political movement that advocates working towards social parity for people of all races and ethnicities. Reformative social movements generally work inside the existing political system, while others are, some are progressive, by the way, and some are reactionary. Progressive ones promote new social patterns, and reactionary reformative movements seek to preserve the status quo or go back in time. In reaction to the civil rights movement, for example, we have continuous lawsuits against or contesting affirmative action. So, just as multiculturalists push for greater racial equality, so white supremacist organizations try to maintain the historical dominance of white people. Finally, we have revolutionary social movements. They're the most extreme of all because they strive for basic transformation of an entire society. Sometimes pursuing specific goals, sometimes spinning utopian dreams. This type of social movement rejects existing social institutions as flawed, while promoting radically new alternatives. Both the left-wing Communist Party in this country, which pushes for government control of the economy, and right-wing militia groups, which advocate the destruction of the government, seek to radically change our way of life. Moving on to explaining social movements, I'm going to discuss one theory here very briefly. Deprivation theory. It holds that social movements arrive among people who feel deprived, people who feel they lack enough income, safe working conditions, basic political rights, or plain human dignity, organize a social movement to bring about a more just state of affairs. The rise of the Ku Klux Klan and passage of Jim Crow laws by whites, intent on enforcing segregation in the South after the Civil War, is an example of deprivation theory. Nasty. Relative deprivation suggests that the difference between what one sees, that is, our country promotes equality, and what one can achieve leads to social movements. Moving right along. Leadership and ideology. I will direct your attention to the notes on social movements handout that you have, also on the website that you can peruse or download if you were not in class last week, and to look at number 2, change agents, and how leadership applies there. I'm going to let you do that, but before we move on to the films, I just want to give you the strategy of one such change agent, Martin Luther King. It was very simple, he said. You educate your enemy, or the person you're trying to change. You negotiate with them, you demonstrate, and then you reconcile. And you do this over and over and over again. Educate your opponent, negotiate with them. If you don't get what you want, demonstrate, and then reconcile. Working together, he said, does not mean selling out. You can be partners with other groups, but not necessarily friends. So we're going to end part 2 with looking at some video clips, which are available on the website. Let me just find the right one here. Okay. And they are found on a selected video. We have the Southern School Desegregation, the Montgomery Bus Boycott, and Freedom Summer. And I would like you to look at those at your leisure and do your assignment for the week. And we can then move on to part 3, which is chapter 7. Thank you.